Nothing happens while you live. The scenery changes, people come in and go out, that's all. There are no beginnings. Days are tacked on to days without rhyme or reason, an interminable, monotonous addition.
But before we continue the video, have you heard of an amazing free-to-play MMORPG PvP for your phone?
But before that, you've probably seen that funny advert and they've decided to sponsor me. I'm playing Raid Shadow Legends. And please don't take my word for it.
Because this video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. That's right, multi-auto battle mode.
Available now on Android and iOS, free to download.
Free on iOS and Android.
In a world of sublime games, the poignancy of Kong Gao's Finding Paradise, the intensity of Hidetaka Miyazaki's Sekiro, we find ourselves at a strange juncture. Many of the world's most played games are, by and large, derided, written off as bad faith cash grabs. Some of the games that humanity actually plays, day after day, year after year, are the subjects of infamy and ridicule.
Raid is a one-sided cash infusion for directing viewers into a predatory and psychologically manipulative feedback loop of advertising and paywalls.
This ridicule is not undeserved. Many of these games should be taken to task for their heavy-handed marketing, their Skinner box design, and their abuse of players with addictive, obsessive personalities. But staring into the dystopic maw of Raid's monetization, I can't help but feel something other than mere annoyance. Raid makes me feel like I've been here before, that this hell of stamina potions, lottery tickets, and vacuous satisfaction is an echo of a problem that existed long before pay to win and autoplay. The idea of paying to avoid certain monotonies is not new, and designing systems that encourage this non-essential spending is the entire purview of our consumer culture. Why would you cook something for yourself when food is just a microtransaction away? Why keep your old ragtag jalopy when you could upgrade to the new hotness? All it takes is a binding subscription with interest, a lease by any other name. In gachapon gambling, it's hardly a new phenomenon. Before we were gambling for splash art, we were gambling for cardboard stocks and government-sponsored lottery tickets. The latter are a pretty po-faced tax on the impulsive and statistics weak, a federal nod to how hope can fuel irrational spending. Because it is irrational, isn't it? Confronted with the amount of money advertising companies spend, I was once baffled. Is such a tremendous amount really necessary to push a product, to make it profitable? But companies aren't just advertising products. They're advertising the need for those products. They're instilling the subconscious belief that your life really is the lesser without soft drinks, beauty products, and hot new wheels. This fantasy is so omnipresent, so suffuse in every aspect of our public lives, that we cease to see it as fantasy. Raid Shadow Legends, then, isn't evil, not in particular. Anyway, it echoes a number of evils endemic to consumerism, and while it's likely a net negative for society, if it weren't Plarium's Raid, it would almost certainly be someone else. The problem isn't the individual greed or mediocrity of one company or one product. Raid is a lens through which we can look at how modern games handle achievement and think about why we continue to while away hundreds of millions of hours playing games like Raid and its ilk. Playing games that most of us reject as art and mock as a matter of course. Something about these mobile casino spreadsheets does fascinate us, and I'd like to look for some light amongst the Shadow Legends. Today, which is the best of all possible days, I'm Saoirse Trotter, you are probably skeptical, and we are going to talk about the ethics of Raid Existential Legends. If you've grown up in the internet age, odds are good you're already familiar with some brand of existentialism. When I refer to existentialism, I'm talking about Sartre's unironic belief that the ends of life are neither fixed, foretold, nor discernible. Instead, the ends of life must be continually, intentionally redetermined. To be alive is to be constantly negotiating one's reasons for living. Without this struggle, life is either latent nausea or ritual delusion, and its authenticity is not preserved. For a more thorough take, I highly recommend Sarah Bakewell's At the Existentialist Cafe, but much like your entire high school physics textbook, my definition, while not strictly correct, will have to do.
That'll do, pig.
I lead with existentialism because I believe most games embody a positive existential mindset. Games are about making choices. You move through the designed experience with some intent, be it curiosity, challenge, or just pleasure, and the game succeeds only so long as it continues to simulate that interest. Engaging with a game has a higher baseline of self-involvement than engaging with film, television, or prose. All of those can be engaged with without any conscious effort. I don't think that's the best way to engage with those media, but it is an option. Games demand you be present. Every keystroke wills something to exist, wills an action to occur. This carries a high risk because if a game is boring, the player becomes an accessory to that boredom. The mediocrity of the medium becomes the mediocrity of the participant. A bad game goes up in flames much faster than a bad show. Television can remain external to the viewer. Gameplay cannot. Playing a very bad game has a real chance of making you question your own value, or at least the value of your time. These are the stakes then when we talk about how a game regards its players. Was it designed to maximize that immediate experience of self, or to exploit it? To that end, let me introduce Raid Shadow Legends. What is it? Well, it's
hundreds of champions, thousands of skills.
Forget everything you know about mobile games. Explore, choose your champions, defeat terrifying bosses, win glory in PvP battles. Raid Shadow Legends.
It's basically a bog-standard Japanese gachapon game adapted to the aesthetic tastes of Western fantasy, by which I mean Tolkien's fantasy and its perversions thereof. The gameplay centers around a once peculiar, now common pattern. Rather than manage the fights, you manage the fighters. The popular auto chess genre is a condensed version of Raid's Thrill. If auto chess is about micromanaging a semi-random team of heroes through automated fights, which it is, then Raid is that pattern's extension over several months. Most hero collectors are about the slow burn pleasure of watching a team composition come to fruition. You're playing for the satisfaction that comes from seeing long-term efforts result in incremental improvements. After farming silver and experience for a week, for example, perhaps your arbiter can clear the next floor of the dungeon. Just as some people enjoy tending a garden, tending to the daily growth of your pantheon makes their eventual triumphs more rewarding. To some, this incremental labor is more satisfying than the fleeting, spontaneous victories most games have to offer. Unlike nature, however, this grind is entirely arbitrary. Why does it take 1 week to get a new weapon, or 1 month to max out a character's attributes? This is where we move from the abstract principles into concrete design, and it's where most of these games get malicious. But let's put a pin in the game design bit for now.
Just you wait, Henry Higgins, just you wait.
Before we talk about the particulars of Raid's design and how they relate to the broader existential dialogue, we do need to ask a simpler question. When is monotony good and when is it harmful? When I say monotony, I mean repeating a similar task over and over and over. There are some examples of non-essential monotony that have well-recorded benefits. Practicing an instrument, meditation, and exercise. Other monotonic activities are less clearly beneficial. Is lamenting the state of humanity on Twitter every single day really beneficial for our welfare? What about drug-centered rituals like drinking coffee or smoking various herbs? Repetitious activities give a distinct cadence to our life, but they tend to compete with more novel, challenging experiences. Do I reread my favorite novel for the umpteenth time, or try something that will take me out of my comfort zone? Do I play through Dark Souls again with my trusty USB steering wheel, or try the new Donkey Kong on a Bluetooth Gucci? Or, more apt to this essay, do I spend 30 minutes every day playing Raid Shadow Legends, or do something else? Do anything else? When deciding between the familiar and the new, I can imagine two reasonable maxims, although there are certainly more. Either, 1, my desire to repeat the familiar is not a failure or a product of fear, but a celebration of the activities and media which give my life context. Or 2, my desire to experience the novel in lieu of the familiar is genuine, and I'm more excited by what I may experience than by what I would experience for the nth time. Now, crucially, neither of these is a value judgment. When you decide to rewatch your favorite show instead of Netflix's newest darling, and your friend does the opposite, neither of you is better than the other. The key is that both choices were made with intentionality, that Sartre would be proud. To return to the original question, when is monotony good, I think a solid answer is when it is willfully chosen or provably beneficial. When monotony is compelled, coerced, or provably harmful, it's bad. Which, then, is Raid Shadow Legends.
What are birds? We just don't know.
I don't think it's impossible to choose Shadow Legends. Many players find Gachapon games satisfying, and I'm one of them. Many gamers will try to moralize gameplay loops, a practice as absurd as it is tempting. We want to view the things we like as virtuous, and many people lack the insight, it's difficult to arrive at the insight that two things can be virtuous without qualifying one against the other. My enjoyment of JPEG hero management doesn't besmirch your enjoyment of Twitch shooters. Diverse enjoyments make life richer, and it's to the enormous benefit of the industry that different people like different things. It's possible some gameplay loops may have more extraneous benefits than others. Shooters may improve your eyesight, and card games may salinate your blood. But calling one type of game virtuous and another vicious tends to mean arguing in bad faith. The content of games can be moralized or politicized, so by all means, encourage developers to create more games that affirm love and life. But don't extend that same moralization to the patterns of play people enjoy. Ultimately, the pattern of play we choose matters less than the meaning we make from that experience, and not all play experiences are equally inspirational. Meaning can be made from many things, just as a flower can grow in many climes, but that doesn't mean we should settle for impoverished soil. One gameplay loop may not be any more virtuous than another, but implementations of that gameplay loop, that's where the spectrum lies. Ask yourself this. Is Raid Shadow Legends designed to maximize the joy of its players? And if not, what does it desire? If you think the question is too ludicrous or sentimental, I'd invite you to relax your cynicism. Many of the industry's biggest blockbusters hinge on affirmational joy, and Nintendo has built an empire on games that are full of whimsy, discovery, and play for play's sake. Even Dark Souls, a game with a morose gothic name, affirm the joy of hundreds of thousands by offering a world where persistence, curiosity, and getting good unlocked wonder after wonder. These are the games people can play for a lifetime. Games where excellence of design was not compromised, and the intent of the developer was to create the best experience for everyone that picked up a controller. In games that matter, it's human experience, joy, horror, empathy, excitement, that guides the divine hand of design. I'll give Shadow Legends this. There are few games that make me ask this question: what did they mean for me to feel so keenly? It's precisely the nihilism of Raid's in-game advertisements, constantly begging you to buy in-game currency, shortcuts, lottery tickets, that force me to reconsider why I play games at all, and whether I'm playing by my own willed choice or by the coerced caprice of a marketing division. It was like smoking an entire box of cigarettes. The sudden oversaturation of consume made even moderate acts of gaming consumption noxious. Shadow Legends forced me to realize exactly how arbitrary these designed experiences are, and how carelessly many of them wield the power of their play patterns. So, in the interest of understanding exactly how irresponsibly Raid conducts itself, let's take a walk back in time. Back to 1095, to be exact. Once upon a time, in the Catholic communities of Europe, the idea of purgatory carried heavy weight. You would need to be purged of sin before entering heaven, and it wasn't likely to be a pleasant ordeal. If you wanted to pay off some of sin's debt on earth, you could partake in virtuous things, prayer, good works, Sudoku, or make up the difference with cold, godly cash. Financial indulgences were the medieval equivalent of a Disney World fast pass through purgatory. Some people were even told exactly how much purgatory they could shave off for each dollar spent. 2 years for 10 doubloons, say. And while we, by and large the heirs of Martin Luther's audacity, may shake our heads at the prospect of paying for paradise, it does make a lot of sense. If we pay to alleviate tedium and suffering on earth, which we do, why not in heaven? As below, so too above. Is suffering not endemic to life, and bribery the primary means by which we escape it? I think not, but it is a tempting attitude to indulge. Raid is built on this long-standing human fantasy. If you pay, your load becomes lighter. Your indulgence is complete. Let's try to be optimistic. What good could come of allowing players to circumvent your content by paying real money? Well, you've created an artificial desire to have a fully upgraded AFL or a statistically superior JPEG of an axe. And the game has given you a way to hasten that dopamine hit. Your brain doesn't want to spend 2 weeks in the salt mines. So allowing you to pay to avoid that labor gives you a momentary feeling of empowerment. You have wealth. A little bit, anyway. You've exercised some agency over the speed of your own progression and gained an advantage over those poor schmucks that can't grease the wheels of industry. But what makes luxury spending, spending that improves an experience as opposed to merely enabling that experience, what makes it good? Virtuous. Because buying an indulgence from Plarium, much like the Catholic Church, is a dubious proposition. Apologies, peasants.
Help! Help! I'm being repressed, bloody peasant!
An indulgence is a luxury good or service that grants you peace of mind. If you anticipate less suffering, that is good. But the suffering originated in what the church told you. They planted the seeds of agitation, then reaped a profit by alleviating the manufactured fear. Raid does the exact same. It creates dozens of problems, such as chance-based equipment upgrades, extremely slow character acquisition, and interminable grinds, then allows you to pay to opt out of the boredom. Why design gameplay experiences your players are willing to pay you to skip? Because they will pay.
Here comes the money! Here we go!
Wait. It's not that simple, is it? Some tedium is good. We've already established that. Semi-monotonous acts can be affirmational and intentional. If all grinding was bad, why have people poured millions of exuberant hours into Diablo, Warframe, World of Warcraft? Surely those players weren't all conned or manipulated. They chose to spend the precious free time they had killing the same enemies over and over in pursuit of preciously rare artifacts. And by and large, their true reward wasn't the pot of golden swords at the end of the raid bow. It was the repetitious acts of mastery, of slaying the monster, seeing the treasure spill. It was the journey with their friends and fellows towards an uncertain reward, with challenges and pitfalls along the way. When Diablo 3 gave players the option to just buy the loot that would otherwise require hours of questing, it destroyed the game. You could still play as though that feature didn't exist, but to what end? The journey became a little less wonderful after the game's design rendered it non-essential. We all know reality isn't a meritocracy where everyone has earned their lot through labor and skill. But games aren't reality. The meritocracy is possible. It's well within reach. Why should we pour real-world inequalities into a designed world? Studios must reap a profit. But deriving that profit by hobbling the play experience for the vast majority, that's a fool's errand. If your game is beloved, it will succeed without advertising. If your game is reviled, advertising will gore your profits and players both as you hurl burning heaps of money to keep hitting susceptible new marks. So, to be frank, I don't believe there's a world in which paying for progression or paying to remove intentionally tedious loops ever improves the quality of a game. It improves the viability of the game as a product, certainly. It improves the prospects of shareholders, it gets the CEO salivating, but it can only hurt the game as an experience, as art. All progression systems are arbitrarily paced, yes, but the essential element is the preservation of the pace selected. Do not betray your players by offering an alternative toll bridge downriver. That cheapens any achievement and dispels the illusion of the absolute. If you could achieve anything and everything by the universal means of money, what flavor would be left in labor? We prize our relationships so highly because they cannot be bought. The only road that leads to love is the long observance of kindness, care, and cooperation. The games with meaningful grinds offer a similar one-way street. Finding a legendary weapon may take days, but we're all in this together. There's a shared context in which the arbitrary work being done gains meaning because it is inherently fun and affirms our honest efforts in a way reality has not yet achieved.
And we all live
We arrive now at the only place left to go before we deliver Raid's verdict, the burden of omnipotence. Brought to its logical extreme in One Punch Man, and felt more generally by anyone using cheat codes in a video game, the problem is this. Once you gain the power to sculpt or easily overcome a reality, participation in that reality may become vacuous and unfulfilling. This happens to a lot of Elder Scrolls players when they first discover console modification, or the ability to change in-game variables on a whim. In a world where you can alter anything with a single line of input, what value does organic progression retain? And does putting a monetary tax on those cheat codes, as Raid does, make them any more palatable or any less? Almost all things in gachapon games may be purchased with time or money. The moneyed person is effectively buying time by cheating the game's natural play pattern. A play pattern that is increasingly designed to make those shortcuts enticing. Raid tempts players to spend their time on underwhelming gameplay in the hopes of finding rare characters, more powerful items, and more difficult content. Yet, when those systems fail to be sufficiently fertile for meaning-making by design, Raid prods our wallets to make up the difference. We don't walk away for any number of reasons. Sunk cost fallacy, gambling addiction, inertia. We may even enjoy the pain, having grown masochistically fond or proud of how we've weathered an unreasonable grind. When such games gain such a powerful hold over our psyche, it's a small wonder their monetization strategy has run rampant, and that it continues to be compelling even as we wise up to its charade. The outside world is constantly bombarding us with mandates to consume, to treat ourselves, to circumvent reality. These games tempt us to buy temporary hits of omnipotence, temporarily letting us bend the usual rules of engagement, but these hits drain even more color out of the ordinary gameplay as soon as we come down from the high. It's rare we stop to consider which aspects of an experience are worth holding on to and which we should seek to subvert or eliminate. Given the opportunity to replace X task by paying Y sum, should we always do so? And having done so, how should we feel? We can even take money out of the equation. If you could get rid of washing dishes forever and never have to pick up another sponge, would you? It's popular to fantasize about having enough money or power to outsource all of life's maintenance tasks. We tend to valorize highly skilled, abstract labor and demonize the brute work of actually being a breathing, palpating body. While I despise doing dishes as much as the next person, I would be cautious about stripping dignity from the mundane and classifying everything menial as less human. Removing every time-consuming aspect of Skyrim, gaining experience, traveling, fighting, renders the game fairly hollow and impotent. Without tasks or difficulty, what remains to create friction? Without friction, how can the gameplay create warmth or contrast? There are worthier tasks than others. I wouldn't wish lockpicking minigames on my worst enemy, but it's variance in the landscapes of engagement that makes the peaks more precious. Just as children eventually stop doing things just to prove they can, and begin to do only those things which must be done or seem worthy of doing, so too do most gamers retreat from cheat codes and begin to engage with games on their own terms. If we trust that a game was designed to affirm joy, we should wade into that design without twisting it, bending it, or lobotomizing portions of the experience. Sisyphus, doomed to push a boulder forever uphill, may not be so miserable as the myth implies. The game is set and the terms are clear. To use the words of Camus, the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Happier than he would be if he were omnipotent or responsible for designing the boulder rolling game himself. Which brings us to the final stretch. Is there a silver lining to the lifetimes humanity has spent playing Shadow Legends? Is it really all dross, or has something been gained? When we began work on this video, I was still playing a gachapon game. It ate about 30 minutes a day. It was rewarding in the beginning, but slowly dovetailed into tedium. The decision-making and challenge of the early days gave way to a sort of dishwashing obligation. Furthermore, another gachapon game, the finest ever made, I imagine, has taken the world by storm. It puts Raid to shame. Here is actual innovation, inspiration, heart-soaring symphonics, artistic excellence. But when the beauty begins to wane, and the only content that remains requires an open wallet or daily trudge. What is Genshin Impact's worth? It's non-zero, at the very least. We must fight our desire to associate longevity with quality. Brief experiences can provide food and warmth for years to come, and massive time sinks can fade from memory the moment they end. If we engage with Genshin Impact searching for immediacy, for an experience of self, of intentionality, of the first 40 hours and ignore the rest, there's a lot to enjoy. The same is true for Impact's degenerate half-cousin, Shadow Legends. The game isn't devoid of enjoyments, but these games must be approached differently than games designed in good faith. Sinking into Breath of the Wild, Sekiro, Animal Crossing even, you can trust that the developer's express intent was to design something wonderful. You can take the game's hand and let it lead you where it will. Raid was not designed to make you happy. It was designed to extract money, and whatever experience it provides is subservient to that goal. This doesn't mean we can't enjoy gachapon games. I have, and will continue to do so, but we can't give Plarium our hands and trust that they have our best interests at heart. We need to enjoy their gameplay from a measured distance, remembering they aren't our friends. More than that, we must design our own ends within these games. What the game wants you to do, spend money, chase lotteries, grind, it isn't in your best interest. So you have to decide for yourself the purpose of playing.
All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
That, then, is the silver lining, the contribution of Raid, Genshin Impact, and countless other slot machines. They have substituted the thoughtless Arcadian bliss of old for the new nihilism of microtransaction-mediated progression. These games force an encounter with the existential. They force a crisis wherein the player realizes, eventually, that the game's ends, what it wants, are antithetical to the player's own happiness. That crisis resolves when you cease to chase the game's incentives, the things you were told to value, and begin to play towards your own design, towards ends you've determined for yourself. That, then, is the silver lining, the contribution of Raid, Genshin Impact, and countless other slot machines. They've substituted the thoughtless Arcadian bliss of old for the new nihilism of microtransaction-mediated progression. These games force an encounter with the existential. They force a crisis wherein the player realizes, eventually, that the game's ends are antithetical to the player's own happiness. That crisis resolves when you cease to chase the game's incentives, the things you were told to value, and begin to play towards your own design, towards ends you've determined for yourself. Once again, I'm Saoirse Trotter. Think kindly of yourself and others, and see you again soon.